I really don't like people. I'm sorry, I don't. That's just who I am.
Talk to me about that. What do you mean you don't like people?
I just don't like being around a bunch of people, and it's kind of ironic because I can go out in an arena full of 20,000 people and be all right with it.
I hated him. Those 3 words have been said about one man more than almost anyone else in the history of professional wrestling. That man is Brock Lesnar. Let us start at the peak. The moment everything changed. The moment that told the world exactly who this man was and exactly how far he was willing to go. It is WrestleMania 30, New Orleans. The year is 2014. The crowd inside the Mercedes-Benz Superdome is electric. 80,000 people are on their feet. The Undertaker is in that ring. 21 WrestleManias. 21 wins. Nobody had ever come close. Nobody had ever seriously tried. That streak was not just a record. It was the soul of WrestleMania itself. Every year, the question was the same. Who would try? And every year, the answer was the same. Nobody could. It was sacred. It felt permanent. It felt like something the business had decided would never end. Then Brock Lesnar put him down. 1, 2, 3. The arena went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Grown men sat with their mouths open. Children looked at their parents in confusion. Commentators could not find words. It was the single most shocking moment in WrestleMania history. And the man who caused it, he did not celebrate wildly. He did not break down. He did not fall to his knees or stare at the lights or soak in the moment. He stood there, calm and expressionless, like a man who had just finished a clean day at the office. Because for Brock Lesnar, that is exactly what it was. He walked into that building to do a job. He did it. He walked out. That is the whole story of Brock Lesnar in professional wrestling. Business first, emotion last, every single time, toward no exceptions. But how does a man get to that level while so many people in the business genuinely cannot stand him? How does a man break the most sacred record in his industry and still leave people shaking their heads, not just in awe, but in frustration? That is what this video is about. And before we go any further, if this kind of real behind-the-scenes story is something you enjoy, use the hype feature and give this video some hype right now. It helps other fans find it, and it keeps these real stories coming. Now, back to Brock. 10 wrestlers, 10 real conflicts, 10 moments where the heat was not just on-screen drama, it was personal, it was professional, and in some cases, it got very, very close to becoming something far uglier than a scripted rivalry. These are not just people who disliked working with Brock Lesnar. These are 10 case studies in who this man really is, and what happens when someone crosses his lines. Because Brock Lesnar has rules. They are not written down anywhere. He does not hand them to you in a contract. You do not get a warning or a guide. You learn them the hard way. And the 10 men on this list all found that out in different ways, at different times, for very different reasons. Some felt he was cold. Some felt he was dangerous. Some felt he was selfish. A few simply felt he broke something that could not be fixed. And one had his entire personal life turned upside down. But here's the thing. Every single clash on this list comes back to the same root. Brock Lesnar does not see professional wrestling as a brotherhood. He does not see the locker room as family. He sees it as a workplace, a well-paid, a very physical workplace. And when your fellow workers start expecting things from you that you never agreed to give, friction follows fast. That friction is what we are going to explore today. Starting at number 10, all the way down to the man who represents the deepest and most layered conflict of Brock Lesnar's entire career. Let us get into it. Before we get to the names, we need to understand the model. Brock Lesnar does not live like a wrestling superstar. He lives on a farm in Canada. He does not post on social media. He does not show up to fan events. He does not do the usual press rounds or sign deals for reality shows or try to keep his face in front of a camera between appearances. He spends his days in near total seclusion with his wife Rena, known to WWE fans as Sable, and their sons Turk and Duke. Hush, this is not an accident, and this is a deliberate strategy. By staying invisible between appearances, Brock Lesnar stays rare, and rare things are valuable. Every time he does show up, it feels like a genuine event, not just another match on a packed schedule, a special occasion, something you cannot afford to miss. That is the model. Stay hidden, stay rare, stay powerful. And from a pure business point of view, it works brilliantly. He gets paid top-tier money for fewer dates than almost anyone else on the roster. He protects his body. He keeps his aura completely intact. He operates as what many have called the final boss of professional wrestling, a man who exists on a different tier from everyone around him. But here's the cost of that model. In wrestling culture, the road is everything. You earn earn your place by showing up, by grinding, by doing the small shows, the long drives, the midnight flights from one city to the next, by being there day after day and paying your dues in sweat and missed holidays. That is the old code. That is the unwritten rule that almost everyone follows without question. Brock Lesnar has never followed that rule, not even at the start. And when a man breaks that code and still gets paid more than the people following it, resentment builds fast. The locker room is not just a physical space, it is a social one. There are codes in there, invisible but real. And when someone sits outside those codes and still takes the biggest slice of the pie, people notice, people talk, and sometimes people do more than talk. That is the foundation of almost every conflict on this list. Not pure personal hatred, not petty jealousy, but a genuine clash between two completely different ideas of what this business should be. Old culture meeting a new model, tradition meeting cold calculation, and Brock Lesnar, almost every single time, wins that clash. Now, the 10 men who found that out the hard way. Number 10, Mark Mero. Most of the names on this list are about wrestling business. This one is different. This one is personal in a way that goes well beyond the ring, the locker room, or anything that happened on television. In 2003, Sable, real name Rena Mero, returned to WWE. At the time, she was still married to Mark Mero, a former WWE Intercontinental Champion and her husband of several years. Mark was at home during her time back on the road. He was taking care of their daughter, living what he believed was a committed, normal marriage, trusting that the agreement between them was solid. Then the phone calls stopped coming at night. Sable and Mark had a simple agreement. No matter where she was or how late it was, they would always talk before bed. One night she did not call, then another night, then another after that. Mark's suspicions started building quietly. He eventually used his knowledge of her phone password to listen to her voice messages. What he heard stopped him cold. Another wrestler was on those messages, someone she was clearly involved with romantically. That wrestler was Brock Lesnar. Mark Mero has spoken about that moment publicly and without hesitation. He described what it felt like with real clarity. His heart was broken. He could not sleep. He could not eat. He was sweating constantly. It was not a clean, business-like ending to a relationship. It was the kind of discovery that takes something permanent out of a person. Here is the remarkable part. Mero's first instinct was rage. He wanted to confront the man involved. He wanted, in his own words, to kick the living tar out of him. Then he found out who that man was. Brock Lesnar, a 290-pound legitimate combat machine, an NCAA heavyweight champion who would later go on to become a UFC heavyweight champion. And Mark Mero, to his credit, made a practical decision very quickly. He chose forgiveness and moving on rather than a confrontation he could not win. The divorce came quickly. Sable and Brock married in 2006. But here is the second layer of this story, and it is very Brock Lesnar. After everything settled, Brock reportedly asked Sable to leave the company entirely. He did not like the idea of her being on the road in what he described as a testosterone-filled environment. She stepped back from the spotlight. She left the cameras behind. She moved to the farm in Canada. Her career in front of audiences was effectively over from that point. He crossed a significant personal line with someone else's life. He was unapologetic about it. And then he locked the situation down, made the decisions he wanted to make, and controlled everything that followed. No extended drama, no press statements, just a line drawn and a door shut. What this story reveals about Brock Lesnar is not flattering in the traditional sense, but it shows the same instinct that runs through every conflict on this list. He saw something he wanted. He went after it. He dealt with the consequences on his own terms. And then he moved forward without looking back once. There is no recorded public apology, no attempt to rebuild the relationship with Mero or acknowledge what the discovery cost him. For Brock, the situation was handled. The chapter was closed. For Mark Mero, it was the defining moment of a chapter he never chose to open in the first place. Number 9, Matt Riddle. Matt Riddle arrived in WWE carrying a lot of noise around him. Former UFC fighter, relaxed, barefoot persona, real fighting background, real confidence, and one big, very public ambition. He wanted to face Brock Lesnar. He said so constantly on social media, in interviews. He tagged Brock directly. He called him out by name. He said he would retire him. He said he was ready. He built his entire public image around the idea of this potential collision. For most wrestlers, calling out a bigger name publicly is a smart move. It puts you in the same conversation. It raises your profile. It tells the world you think you belong at the top level. For Brock Lesnar, it was a violation, a direct one. Brock Lesnar views his name as property, commercial property with real, measurable value. And when someone uses that name without consent to build their own profile, Brock treats it the same way he would treat any other kind of unauthorized use of something that belongs to him. He shuts it down with no discussion. At the 2020 Royal Rumble, Brock found Riddle backstage. He grabbed him by the shoulder, and he delivered a very clear, very direct message. He told Riddle to stop saying his name and stop tagging him in things online. He told him they would never work together. Not now, not at some point down the road, and ever. That word was the whole message. message. Witnesses said Riddle took it relatively calmly. He was not visibly shaken or rattled, but the reality of what had just happened was very significant. In one short backstage conversation, Brock Lesnar had closed a door that fans had been excited about. A potential dream match between two legitimate combat sports athletes, two men with real fighting backgrounds, was gone before it had ever been properly discussed. Just like that, no appeal process. Industry veterans noted clearly that working an angle without the other person's knowledge is bad for business. That is the lesson Riddle learned directly from the source. You do not build a story involving Brock Lesnar unless Brock Lesnar has agreed to it. Not because he needs to be asked politely, but because his name is a product with a specific market value, and he decides entirely how that product gets used. The heat here was not loud or explosive. It was quiet, final, and cold. And that kind of heat, the kind that ends with a closed door rather than a raised voice, often does the most lasting damage to a career. The dream match never happened. It was never rescheduled or revisited. The crowd wanted it. The business logic for it was real. But none of that mattered once Brock had said the word never. In his world, that word has weight, and everyone in the locker room understood it. Number 8, Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley, then known in WWE as Dean Ambrose, got the WrestleMania 32 match that many performers would have given almost anything for. A street fight against Brock Lesnar. Dallas. When over 80,000 people in the AT&T Stadium, one of the biggest stages in the history of professional wrestling, he found the experience to be one of the most deeply frustrating of his career. Moxley is a performer built around chaos, around real gritty physical storytelling that feels unscripted and dangerous. He wanted the WrestleMania 32 match to be a proper, weapons-filled brawl, a genuine bloodbath with energy and unpredictability running through every minute of. He pitched ideas, multiple ideas. He came into those conversations with genuine creative hunger and a specific vision for what this match could be on that stage. Brock shut every pitch down, not with alternatives or counter-proposals, just with disinterest and a brush-off, as if the ideas were not even worth engaging with. And the match had no rehearsal until hours before the show began. That is not nerves or last-minute adjustments. That is a fundamental lack of investment in what was happening. Moxley said publicly on the Stone Cold podcast that he felt invisible. He said it felt like the people in charge had already decided that as long as Brock was on the card, the match was fine, regardless of its quality, regardless of how much effort went into it. There were props involved. A little red wagon was brought out. A chainsaw provided by Terry Funk appeared at ringside. A barbed wire bat from Mick Foley showed up. None of them were used in any meaningful way. They appeared and then disappeared without impact, like stage dressing that everyone forgot was there. The match landed flat. It was not the defining WrestleMania moment Moxley had imagined. He called Brock's approach lazy. He said that directly and without softening it. He was not vague about his disappointment. But here is the fuller picture. Brock was almost certainly protecting his body during that period. A return to UFC was being arranged. UFC 200 was on the horizon. Going into a genuine weapons-filled bloodbath in a WWE ring weeks before a UFC return would have been a terrible business decision physically. So Brock kept it clean. He kept it safe. He protected himself for what was coming next, for his business, not for Moxley's creative vision. That is the clash at the heart of this story. Not hatred, not cruelty. Two completely different understandings of what the work was actually for. Moxley saw an opportunity to create something lasting. Brock saw a contract obligation to fulfill on his way to the next chapter. And the gap between those two things on the biggest stage Moxley had ever stood on produced one of the most disappointing matches of the WrestleMania era. Moxley left WWE not long after. When he talked about his time there, this match was one of the things he kept coming back to. Not with anger exactly, but with the specific kind of disappointment that comes from knowing what something could have been and living with what it actually was. Number 7, Braun Strowman. The story of Brock Lesnar and Braun Strowman is the most physical and the most quickly resolved on this entire list. And in some ways, for that reason, it is the most honest. At the 2018 Royal Rumble, both men were part of a triple threat match alongside Kane. During the action, Strowman caught Brock with a stiff knee to the side of the head. It was an accident. He overextended, got caught up in the moment, and the knee landed harder than it should have. Brock responded immediately with a legitimate closed fist punch directly to the side of Strowman's skull. Not a worked strike, not a safe professional hit designed to look like contact, a real punch. The sound of it carried through the arena. Strowman has since described the sensation in vivid detail. He said his skull moved and his skin caught up. He said you can see it clearly in slow motion footage. He nearly went unconscious right there in the ring during a live pay-per-view event. The locker room reaction was split. Some called it childish. Others called it old school. The thinking behind it is straightforward. In the physical language that Brock operates in, if you hit him hard without warning, he hits you back to remind you where the line is. Not to injure, not out of anger, but to send a message in the only language that he considers binding between two physical men. That is the the receipt. That is the notice served. What happened backstage after the match is the part that reveals the most. Brock and Braun laughed about it. Genuinely. Strowman said he had got a bit too excited and that Brock had to check him. He did not carry a grudge. He did not feel disrespected. He understood the exchange for what it was. Two dominant physical forces communicating in the way that dominant physical forces do. They described themselves as dominant males who simply would not back down from anything. And that mutual understanding, earned through real physical exchange rather than through conversation or seniority, he produced something rare in Brock Lesnar's career on this list. Genuine mutual respect, arrived at quickly and without any lasting damage. This is one of the clearest examples of how Brock's unwritten rules work. You do not earn his respect through words. You earn it by surviving what he gives back and understanding why it happened. There was no long conversation after the match, no mediation, no explanation required. Both men walked backstage, laughed, and moved on. That is the resolution Brock responds to. Fast, physical, finished. No feelings to discuss. Just two men who know exactly where they stand. Established in about 3 seconds of real contact. Number 6, John Cena. Brock Lesnar returned to WWE in 2012 after 8 years away. He came back as the most expensive, most carefully protected part-time talent the company had ever put together. Limited dates, top-level pay, monster status deliberately preserved during his time away. The plan was clear. Every time Brock appeared, it had to feel like a genuine event. Something rare, something dangerous. John Cena was the full-time face of the company at that moment. The man who was there every week, every show, every signing session, every early morning press call. He represented the complete commitment to the grind. The idea that you show up, you work, you earn it every single night without exception. Their first match together after the return, Extreme Rules 2012, was brutal and physical. Brock dominated for 20 straight minutes. It was designed to re-establish him as a different kind of threat, not a normal match, a statement. And the planned ending was specific. After the pinfall, Cena would be carried out on a stretcher. Battered, finished. The monster would have made his arrival mean something permanent. Instead, Cena stood up immediately after the count and delivered a cheerful promo to the crowd. He smiled. He waved. He acted like a man who had just come through a tough contest rather than a man who had been physically taken apart for 20 minutes in front of the entire company. Brock was furious backstage. He felt that Cena had deliberately chosen his relationship with the crowd over protecting the monster aura that the entire match had been built to establish. The stretcher finish existed for one specific reason: to tell the watching world that Brock Lesnar was a different category of dangerous. Cena walking over it and pumping up the fans sent exactly the opposite message. Beyond that specific moment, the wider locker room tension over Brock's part-time deal was very real. Performers working a full schedule, flying every week, performing night after night, watched a man come in for a handful of dates per year and leave with more than almost anyone on the full-time roster. That kind of imbalance does not stay invisible. It creates a quiet, persistent resentment that colors everything around it. Cena and Lesnar eventually found a professional working relationship in the years that followed. But those early years after the 2012 return were genuinely cold, built on completely different ideas of what loyalty to the company looked like and what a performer owed the crowd when the match ended. The no-sell moment became one of the most discussed backstage incidents of the entire Lesnar return era. Not because it was violent or dangerous, but because it showed how two men, both at the very top of the same company, could watch the same match and draw completely opposite conclusions about what the right thing to do was when it ended. Number 5, Big Show. Big Show, real name Paul White, was one of the central figures in building Brock Lesnar into a legitimate star during his first WWE run. Their work together produced one of the most memorable moments in the history of WWE television. In 2003 on SmackDown, Brock performed a superplex on the 7-foot, 500-pound Big Show, and the ring collapsed completely under the combined weight of both men. The mat buckled, the ropes gave way, the whole structure fell. It was spectacular in a way that felt genuinely unrepeatable. It announced Brock's power to the world in the most physical terms possible. Big Show gave a great deal to make Brock Lesnar look extraordinary, and he expected something back. When Brock left in 2004 to pursue an NFL career, Show's reaction was not quiet disappointment kept to himself. He was openly and deeply hurt. He described Brock's departure as a monumental slap in the face to someone with as much pride as himself. His frustration came from a specific place. He had worked hard. He had done what was asked. He had chased what he described as Vincent K. McMahon's imaginary brass rings, doing everything the company required, staying loyal, putting the work in year after year, and the man handed the company's future had walked away from it without a second look. That felt, to Big Show, like a betrayal of the most basic agreement the industry operates on. You work your way up, you help the people coming after you, and those people stay and carry what you built forward. Brock broke that agreement completely. Here is the contrast that makes makes this story particularly sharp. In his autobiography, Brock described Big Show as a super nice, sentimental guy who cried when Brock told the locker room he was leaving. He wrote it without malice, but also without a trace of shared feeling. He was observing the emotion, recording it, not joining it or feeling it himself, not even slightly. Big Show saw a brotherhood. Brock Lesnar saw a workplace. That is the entire story contained in a single line. And that gap, that complete failure of two men to share the same emotional reality about what this business meant, it is the core of everything between them. The ring collapse, the years of building, the genuine effort Show put in to help make Brock look like something the industry had never seen before. All of it, in Show's mind, pointed toward an obligation, a social debt, and Brock walked out the door without paying it. For a man as proud and as committed as Big Show, that kind of thing does not simply fade with time. Number 4, Goldberg. The match between Brock Lesnar and Goldberg at WrestleMania 20 in 2004 is remembered as one of the biggest disappointments in WrestleMania history, not because of a dramatic backstage incident or a dangerous finish, but because of atmosphere, because of energy, because of two men who gave the crowd absolutely nothing to connect with. Both were leaving WWE after that event. They both were deeply unhappy with their situations. Goldberg's frustration centered on identity. WWE had been booking him in long, drawn-out matches that required sustained storytelling and extended physical performance. But Goldberg's entire identity as a star, the thing that had made him a phenomenon in WCW, was built on being unstoppable, on short, savage, dominant victories. Walk in, spear, jackhammer. Walk out in under 3 minutes. He was a monster built for destruction, not a marathon performer built for endurance. The longer matches the company was giving him exposed real limitations that the short squashes had always hidden. He felt his greatest strength being stripped away match by match. Brock was mentally somewhere else completely. His mind was already off the road and pointed toward the NFL or a return to combat sports. But he had decided to leave. He was going through the motions at WrestleMania, while most of the roster would have done anything to be in his position on that stage. The crowd at Madison Square Garden felt every second of it. They could sense the indifference from both men. The match was loudly booed. The crowd chanted for both of them to leave. It was a sad, flat, deflating ending for two men who, at their individual peaks, had been among the most exciting physical forces the business had produced. Then came 2016 and everything changed. By that point, Brock had returned as the ultimate gatekeeper of professional wrestling, the man who decided which matches mattered and which ones did not. When Goldberg came back for another run, Brock agreed to help rebuild the legacy. He took a 2-minute squash loss at Survivor Series. Fast, clean, and shocking. The kind of defeat that instantly restored Goldberg's monster aura and sent a full arena into a genuine frenzy. This 2016 moment might be the most revealing moment on this entire list. Brock's heat is tied directly to business logic. In 2004, there was no business reason to care. In 2016, there was a very clear one. And when the business makes sense, Brock is not just willing to cooperate. He cooperates effectively and without ego. The man who had helped ruin Goldberg's WrestleMania moment in 2004 helped fully restore Goldberg's icon status 12 years later. That is not sentiment. That is just good business. And good business, for Brock Lesnar, has always been the one thing that can override everything else. Every grudge, every old heat, every uncomfortable history. When the terms are right and the outcome makes sense, the Beast cooperates, quietly, efficiently, without making a speech about it. Number 3, Chris Jericho. At SummerSlam 2016, Brock Lesnar fought Randy Orton in the main event. The planned finish involved Brock opening up Orton using legitimate elbow strikes to the forehead. The industry calls this going hard way. The result was a genuinely alarming scene. Orton was left with a real concussion. He needed 10 staples to close the wound on his forehead. The mat was saturated with blood. It was confronting television. Chris Jericho was watching from the gorilla position, the area just behind the entrance curtain, where performers and senior staff watched the live action during shows. He became increasingly distressed as the match unfolded. He approached producer Michael Hayes directly and asked whether the bloody finish was planned, when Hayes gave a non-answer that told Jericho nothing useful. Jericho, who had long positioned himself as a protector of his colleagues in the locker room, drew the conclusion that Brock had gone off script and was genuinely hurting Orton without consent. That is the worst possible thing you can believe in that environment. When Brock walked back through the curtain after the match, Jericho was right there waiting. Witnesses, including Enzo Amore and Mojo Rawley, both described what followed as a real confrontation. The two men went nose to nose in the middle of the gorilla position. Brock taunted Jericho with offensive language. He told him to either throw a punch or walk away. Jericho did not back down. He admitted later that if it had come to actual physical violence, his strategy was to bite Brock's nose off. Because in a genuine fight against a man built the way way Brock Lesnar is built, you work with whatever weapon is closest to you. Triple H stepped in to separate them first. Then Vince McMahon arrived. Vince scolded Jericho for being unprofessional. Triple H privately told Jericho he had every right to stand up for himself. Eventually, Randy Orton himself confirmed that the finish was entirely planned. The blood and the elbows and the staples were all part of the agreed end. It had never gone off script. That confirmation brought a cold truce, but no real warmth. What this story shows is Brock at his most extreme. He commits completely to the physical aesthetic he believes in. Brutality is part of the product he sells, and he does not soften it for anyone watching. But when that brutality creates real uncertainty in a locker room, and it leaves casualties well beyond the match itself, Chris Jericho was one of those casualties, and he made absolutely sure Brock knew about it. For the rest of the roster watching from that corridor, the message was clear too. Brock can do things on screen that other people cannot do, and when someone questions him for it, not even Triple H stepping in to help is enough to fully smooth things over. Number 2, Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar share more genuine, earned mutual respect than almost anyone else on this list. But the road to that respect was not smooth or polite. It was competitive, physical, and in one famous case, conducted in a locker room with other wrestlers standing around the walls like witnesses at a legal hearing. Both men came from elite amateur wrestling backgrounds. Angle was an Olympic gold medalist. Brock was an NCAA heavyweight champion. That shared pedigree created a very specific kind of competitive tension, the kind that only exists between two people who understand exactly what the other one is physically capable of. They did not need to talk about it. They both knew. In 2003, before a show, the competitive pressure between them reached a breaking point. The two engaged in a legitimate shoot wrestling match backstage. Not a worked match, not a rehearsed television segment, a real contest on the floor, with other wrestlers gathering around the edges to make sure neither man could slip out before it was settled. By Kurt Angle's account, the match lasted 15 minutes. He described it simply as real as it gets. Angle dominated technically. He took Brock down multiple times and was not taken down himself. He was careful to add the important qualifier. In a genuine fight involving punches and raw aggression, Brock's size and striking ability would likely have won. But in pure wrestling, on a mat, the Olympic champion proved his point beyond any argument. That backstage match did something significant that no locker room conversation or amount of seniority could have done. It beat the respect into Brock, not through intimidation, not through status, through demonstrated skill in a language Brock understood completely and trusted completely. You prove it on the mat, or it does not count. Their on-screen rivalry also had a real physical cost. Brock broke Angle's neck during their match at WrestleMania 19 during a botched shooting star press that came down in the wrong place. He broke it again later in the same year, twice. Angle refused to blame him for either injury. His response was direct and without bitterness. He had called both spots himself, he said, so the responsibility was his. That level of professional honesty, taking ownership of your own decisions, even when they cost you physically, is rare. It is something Brock recognized, and it formed the foundation of one of the most genuine professional bonds of his entire career. Not because they decided to like each other, but because they proved things to each other that no amount of words could have settled. That is a rare thing in Brock Lesnar's world. Most of the people on this list never reached it. They clashed with him, and the gap stayed wide. Angle found the one path that actually works with a man like Brock. Show up, demonstrate value, accept the result. The respect that comes from that process is the only kind Brock fully trusts. Number 1, The Undertaker. No name on this list carries more weight in the history of professional wrestling than The Undertaker. Real name Mark Calaway. And no relationship in Brock Lesnar's career contains more layers. Tradition, resentment, corporate theater, a personally delivered insult, a staged confrontation at a UFC event, and finally, the most shocking finish in WrestleMania history. It begins in 2002. The Undertaker made a deliberate and costly professional decision to help build Brock Lesnar into a genuine star. Their Hell in a Cell match at No Mercy was a brutal, physical encounter, built specifically to pass the torch from one generation to the next. Taker put Brock over in a way that very few veterans of his stature were willing to do. He gave physical wear and professional credibility to a 24-year-old newcomer because he believed Brock was the future of the company. He invested years of accumulated goodwill into building someone else up. 2 years later, Brock left. He walked away from WWE to try out for the NFL. For Taker and others who had sacrificed to build him, that felt like a direct waste of everything they had contributed. 2 years of effort and physical cost rendered meaningless by one decision. The resentment stayed. Brock wrote about personal differences with Calaway in his autobiography Death Clutch. More significantly, he reportedly sent an insulting message to Taker through a mutual friend. That message genuinely angered the dead man. And when The Undertaker is genuinely angered by something, it tends not to stay quiet or fade away quietly. Then came UFC 121 in October 2002. 2010. Brock had just lost the UFC Heavyweight Championship to Cain Velasquez. He was bloodied, beaten, standing in the octagon. The Undertaker was present at the event and was being interviewed ringside by journalist Ariel Helwani. He locked eyes with Brock across the arena, and he spoke 4 words clearly. "You want to do it?" For years, that moment was presented as pure, genuine animosity. 2 men with real heat, about to come to blows in a UFC arena, with one of them still bleeding from the main event just minutes earlier. It was one of the most talked about moments in the crossover history between wrestling and MMA. The truth, which came out years later in post-retirement interviews, is more complicated and far more interesting. Calloway admitted that he had been sent to that event by Vince McMahon specifically. Vince wanted to use Taker's real presence and whatever genuine heat remained between them to goad Brock back into a WWE ring. Taker had gone to UFC 121 to pick a fight on Vince McMahon's instructions. It was a worked shoot, a real setting, a real history of tension, a real confrontation in terms of the eyes and the body language, but a planned provocation, not a spontaneous one. The match Vince had planned for WrestleMania 27 never came together. It eventually happened at WrestleMania 30, and what Brock did there rewrote history in a single moment. 21-0, the streak, built across more than 2 decades, across matches that had become genuine events in their own right, across opponents who had given everything they had to stop it. Nobody had managed it. 3 seconds. And one of the most sacred records in sports entertainment was finished. That is the story of Brock Lesnar and The Undertaker. Tradition, betrayal, corporate games, real insults, stage confrontations, and a WrestleMania ending that silenced 80,000 people at once. It is the most complete summary of who Brock Lesnar is in this business that you will find anywhere. It starts with a veteran handing him the keys, and it ends with Brock using those keys to open a door that no one believed existed. So, 10 men, 10 different conflicts, 10 different reasons the heat was real. Mark Mero, because of a personal betrayal that reshaped 2 lives and removed one of them from the public eye entirely. Matt Riddle, because he used a name without earning the right to use it. A John Moxley, because he wanted to create something special and found a partner with no interest in creating anything. Braun Strowman, because he hit too hard and learned the only language Brock respects. John Cena, because he chose his relationship with the crowd over protecting the monster, and the monster took notice. Big Show, because he looked at the same workplace and saw a family, while Brock only ever saw a contract. Goldberg, because shared misery produced a disastrous match, before time and leverage produced something unexpectedly useful 12 years on. Chris Jericho, because he stood up in the gorilla position when most people in that corridor would have stayed silent. Kurt Angle, because he demanded proof on the mat and earned something rare in Brock's world, genuine lasting respect. And The Undertaker, because tradition and cold business calculation are always eventually going to find each other in the same room, and the results are never clean. What is the pattern in all of this? Brock Lesnar's heat is almost never petty. He is not the kind of man who holds small grudges or plots quietly against people he dislikes. When he has a real problem with someone, it comes from a specific, real place, a crossed line, a business violation, a broken agreement, an unapproved use of his name or his time or his brand. His conflicts are the friction produced by a man running a completely different operating system from almost everyone around him. The old wrestling code says you grind, you pay your dues without complaint, you respect the veterans above you, you protect your colleagues beside you, whilst you give back to the locker room that helped make you. You do the small shows and the long drives and the lost weekends, and you earn your place slowly over years. Brock Lesnar has never followed that code. He arrived as a force of nature and immediately started operating by his own rules. He left when he wanted to leave. He came back when the terms suited him exactly. He chose his opponents by business logic rather than obligation or tradition. And he has continued doing that year after year, while the locker room watches and the frustration that comes from watching someone break every rule and still win quietly builds into something that does not have a clean name. But here is what matters most. WWE as a company has never stopped accommodating Brock Lesnar. Not because they have no choice in the matter, but because he delivers something that no one else can manufacture. That rare appearance energy, that sense that when Brock walks through the curtain, something genuinely real is about to happen. Something that cannot be written into existence by a creative team or faked by a talented performer on a full-time schedule. He turned himself into a product the industry cannot afford to replace or replicate. He did that deliberately over years through every unpopular decision he made and every rule he refused to follow. The locker room paid a price for that along the way. The full-time grind feels harder when the highest earner is not there doing it with you. The unwritten rules feel less meaningful when the man who ignores them still gets the biggest check. The resentment on this list is real. The hurt is real. The crossed lines are real. But Brock Lesnar did something that most people in this business never manage. He changed the terms entirely of what a professional wrestling career could look like. He proved that mystery beats constant availability. He proved the final boss does not need to be everywhere to mean everything. He proved that when you protect your value fiercely enough and for long enough, even the people who resent you cannot afford to ignore you. He is not a team player. He has never wanted to be a team player. And in a business that has demanded total commitment to the team for generations, he built the most individual career of the modern era on his terms, in his time, from a farm in Canada that nobody outside his family is invited to visit. Some people on this list will never forgive him for the things he did and the way he did them, when they have earned the right to feel that way. But love him or hate him, Brock Lesnar won. He changed the game. He inverted the old rules. He turned WWE into a company that had to accommodate him rather than the other way around. He is the final boss, and the final boss answers to no one.